Good morning, Stéphane. Very nice to have you with us today. Thank you
Hello,
very
Yves.
much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much to take the time. I know that you have an extremely busy schedule, so we are very pleased to have you for this those 30, 40 minutes to discuss about Moderna. I suggest that we split this discussion in three parts. First of all, maybe talking a little bit about the story, how everything has come. A little bit about COVID. Obviously, it has been an important evolution for Moderna. And maybe most importantly, let's discuss also about the future and many other things that Moderna is doing. I hope this is fine for you. And so maybe let us know how all started for you. How did you end up in this small startup 10 or 9 or 10 years ago, and how do you see things today?
Well, again, Yves, thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure working with you and Bank Mirabaud for so many years, and for the partnership that has enabled us to get to this place. So indeed, it's actually 10 years ago, maybe almost to the day now, that I heard about Moderna. Moderna was just an idea of a company that was being created in Boston. The initial science came from Harvard, and it was a group of some of the best minds of Boston that were trying to think about, would it make sense to start doing an mRNA company? And for those of you that are not biologists on the call, all of us in the field believed, because of what we learned in graduate school, that mRNA could never be a drug. mRNA was believed at the time to be highly unstable, highly immunogenic, and so it was not good properties for medicine. But the piece that was quite intriguing, and that intrigued me when I was CEO of bioMérieux, was if you could make mRNA and deliver it safely in humans, because mRNA is an information molecule, you could basically have a very profound impact on medicine in a very transformational way. I mean, if you think about the pharmaceutical industry, Yves, I think there's been two technology revolution in the last 150 years. The first one was small molecule, small chemical matters. Think about the Prozac, the Lipitor, that has built basically the pharmaceutical industry. But this is a very, very old technology. There's very, very few innovation now. As we all know, it's a trial and error game. Most things are toxic because those small molecules can bind to a lot of things in your body and create toxicity. And then in the 70s, you had an incredible scientific revolution with what is called, at the time, the biotech industry. It's actually the recombinant technology to make protein synthetically in reactors. And this was led, of course, by Genentech, Amgen, Biogen, and Genzyme. And if you look today, I mean, 7 of the top 10 drugs sold in the world are biotech products. And so as we thought about this technology, the notion that you could use messenger RNA to get inside cells and basically to instruct cells, like a little piece of software, to make anything you wanted in a cell was just kind of mind-blowing to us. I remember the first time I heard about it, my head was spinning. I'm like, what is it happening? And so it was a pretty big scientific bet at the time. I told my wife, this has 5% chance of working. But a few things were very clear because mRNA is information. If it was going to work, this was not going to be a one drug company. This was going to be dozens and dozens and dozens of drug company, which in our space, those are incredible numbers. And it was going to enable us to do drugs for disease that you cannot do using existing technology. So the way we thought about it, which is if we're successful, is going to be basically a third pillar in the toolbox of doctors next to small molecule and large molecule. And that was the excitement. And the notion was to say, look, do we take a 5% chance to build a next generation of medicine that's going to impact human life forever, for the rest of time? That's what was attractive behind it. It was totally crazy. When we started, hiring people, most people would not want to join us because most scientists who will talk to come join us and resign from their job to work on mRNA thought we were crazy.
And I remember when we met, it was 2012, I believe. Not only did I not understand anything about what you were telling me, But the only thing I really realized was that it was a huge risk in the technology, in the development of the company, the drugs, and so on. When did you realize that, in fact, it would be a game changer?
So there was a lot of discoveries, because in science you rarely have one thing that's a big aha and then everything changes. You have a lot of iteration of technology improvement. So over the years, and you could ask my wife, she'll tell you many stories where there will be good weeks where I'll come home and say, this is going to work, it's going to change the world and help so many people. And then there are weeks I will come home not so happy, and I was totally bipolar, but going up bipolar. um, but then to your question, there was a big moment that really de-risked a lot of things for me, is when we did our first clinical study, actually in Germany. We started in December 2015, first time in the clinic for Moderna. And in the spring of 2016, we got the clinical data. It was for a pandemic flu strain, which we wanted to test because we could assess very quickly, because flu has a goalpost set by the FDA that's very clear. If you make more than that level of antibody, your vaccine will get approved. If you make less, it will not get approved. And what was remarkable, Yves, is that 100% of the people that were in that study made more antibodies than that bar set by FDA. And, having been in that business for, at the time, 20 years, now 25 years, I'd never heard of a drug where everybody responded. And that's really the thing that gave me a lot of pause in the positive sense of the word. I'm like, wow, this is very profound. All the people who got the drug had a positive effect by the drug with a very tolerable side effect profile. So I'm like, wow, this is really profound. This is really like software. This really works in everybody.
And also, what is quite interesting, especially for us who are living here in Geneva, is that you have a very close, you have built a very close relationship with Switzerland. We know that you have a lot of investors here. We know that you have made this deal with Lonza. You have now your headquarters for Europe, Middle East, and other countries also here between Basel and Lausanne. What brought you to such a close relation with Switzerland, and how do you see those developments for the future?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's because if you think about life science and biotech, those are long investment cycles. You cannot do great science in 2 weeks. It just doesn't happen. And the piece that I've learned over the years, because I used to, as you know, to be CEO of bioMérieux, a global public company, so I used to have investors from around the world. But I've always been really excited and pleased by how long-term Swiss investors are oriented. In the US, people tell you they are long-term because they hold a stock for 1 year, and you just kind of want to be laughing because, of course, 1 year in any business is a very short cycle, but in biotech is a very, very short cycle. And the piece I've always appreciated with the Swiss community in the investment front is a very long-term mindset, people doing very deep work and wanting to understand, one of the best investor is BB Biotech, in Zurich, where the team is fantastic. And they go very, very deep because they are very Swiss in their mindset, which is when they buy a company, they think a bit a la Buffett, like buying the entire company, which is, would I want to own that company forever? And that type of culture is very aligned with how we think about Moderna. I don't think about the company in terms of quarters. I think about the company in terms of decades, because we want to build a very, very impactful company. I believe today, and I'm sure we'll talk about it when we talk about the future, I believe this should be the largest healthcare company in the world one day. And I don't know if it's in 5 years or 10 years or 12 years, but there is no reason with what we know about how this science works, with the speed at which we can develop drug, with a probability of success of a drugs compared to old chemical, molecules. With all those important attributes of mRNA, there is no reason why this could not be the biggest life science company in the world. And so I think this long-term alignment with the Swiss community has made a natural, alliance, I would say, or partnership between Moderna and Switzerland, which we are very thankful for.
And Lonza, briefly.
Lonza, it was, I would say, us. waking up to the fact that we realized in January 2020, I think before a lot of people, that this was going to be a global pandemic like flu in 1918. And so in the first few days of February, I walk into the office of Juan Andres, who is the head of manufacturing, yet another link to Switzerland. He used to be the head of manufacturing for Novartis worldwide. And I walked into Juan's office. I've known Juan forever, 20 years ago. We were colleagues at Lilly with the same boss. And I told Juan, hey, how do we make $1 billion in 2021? And for context, we had made 100,000 doses in 2019. And so he looks at me really funny. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, Juan, it's going to be a pandemic. People are going to die by the thousands or the tens of thousands. We need to make 1 billion doses at least. And so we started scratching ourselves is how could we do that in a very Moderna way, kind of playing the movie backward from success. We can make 1 billion doses. What needs to happen so this is true? And it was very clear that we had no time to build any plant. We had time to increase the capacity of our plant in Massachusetts, but we needed somebody with a lot of experience who could allow us to have a clean room where we could basically drop Moderna equipment in those rooms because we had no time to build the rooms. And we look at the top 5 players in the world. Lonza, as you know, is one of those. And as we talk to all those companies, it was very clear very quickly with Lonza leadership that we are very aligned. And I have to give Lonza a lot of credit. We started to both work, again, going back to the Swiss culture, on this collaboration at risk, which is we basically did a virtual handshake with the chairman of Lonza on a Zoom one morning, really early for me. And the lawyers were working on the contract on the side for a good 6 weeks before we announced the deals, where the engineers were already working and sharing technology and investing time and resources on both sides of both companies, because we knew that every day mattered and that every day was meaning more life saved. And that long-term thinking, again, that you see in the Swiss culture, which you know where, was again very aligned with Moderna, and that's why we picked up Lonza.
So this brings us to COVID. Obviously, COVID arrived early 2020. It changed the life of everybody on Earth, but it also changed particularly your life and Moderna's life. So where are you today? What can you say about how it has transformed Moderna, how you have been organized yourself to do what you have done in such a short period of time? And also maybe we'll talk later on the different variants. How do you see things evolving? How are you going to cover them?
Good. So let me unpack everything. And if I forget something, Yves, keep me honest. So I would say at the macro level, we were ready for this moment. You know, I've worked in infectious disease for 25 years. I was trained by Alain Mérieux and his family in terms of infectious disease. We started chasing this virus between December and Christmas and New Year 2019, when it first emerged without a name from China, and started working on it, which is why we were the first company in the clinic with a vaccine. And then it's actually in Davos, again in Switzerland, you see, Yves, how everything goes back to Switzerland, that it's during the Davos week, the week of January the 20th of 2020, that between Monday arriving in Davos and Wednesday night, it just hit me that this was going to be a pandemic like 1918. And so I changed again, if you want, gear with Moderna and came back to Boston, actually by a quick detour by Washington, D.C., because I wanted to see the FDA, I wanted to meet with Dr. Fauci and his team, which were already our collaborator, and worked with the US government to get help from them to go faster because of the pandemic. And so we moved right into pandemic mode late January 2020. And what this has done for Moderna, I mean, if you think about the company in early 2020, we were an early stage clinical company. We had phase 1 and 1 or 2 phase 2 studies. By July, we were a phase 3 company, late stage development. And by December, we were a commercial company. So the transformation we went through in 11 months was just insane. Usually it takes 5 years for those companies to go through those cycles. And so what COVID has done for Moderna is it has accelerated the company to be commercial by around 5 years, 3 to 5 years. But the other one that I think a lot of people are underappreciating is it has accelerated us to cash flow by around 10 years to turn to cash flow positive. Because if you think about it, the first product that was supposed to launch before COVID was our CMV vaccine, which I believe is a $2 to $5 billion annual peak sales vaccine, but it will have a slower ramp than what we've seen with COVID. As you know, we've announced publicly, we have already signed advanced purchase agreement that if we deliver vaccine this year, could be $18.4 billion. That's an incredible number for a first-year product. And so because of a ramp it would have taken to build CMV sales many years, and because the cash flow of CMV will have to support the entire company pipeline, which at 20 products, it would have taken us several years to get the company cash flow positive. So I think 5-year acceleration to commercial, 10-year acceleration to cash flow positive. As you know, Yves, we've been positive cash flow in Q3 last year, in Q4, and given the sales volume we're expecting this year, I will expect, without disclosing anything confidential, that we should be cash flow positive every quarter this year and profitable every quarter this year. Which, by the way, also a lot of people don't think about this, should lead us into joining the S&P 500. The only index we're not part of today, of a big index, is the S&P 500. We are NASDAQ 100 and many other indexes. And as you know, given the size of the S&P and people that track the S&P, that will be also a big impact on the company. And so as I think about the company now, we've also built subsidiaries, as you said, with a presence in Switzerland, but now we are present in 8 countries. We have announced we're going to build this year Moderna Japan, South Korea, and Australia. And so if you think about the company now, between the cash that we have, the knowledge that we have that this technology can be approved, because before we believed it could be approved, now we know it can be approved, and the commercial network, we don't need to partner anymore. So if you think about the value creation that this represents, in the past, the best deal we will do will be 50-50 profit shares. Usually a deal between a pharma company and a biotech company is 10-20% of the value for a biotech company, because pharma takes all the risk, pays all the cash flow and so on. But if now all the drugs forward are 100% of the economics for Moderna, that is a big, big value creation point, because we have the cash and we have the commercial subsidiary to commercialize the products. And so it's an incredible transformation for the company. I think we're able to execute last year because of the team we have. The team has done an extraordinary job last year. People have literally worked 7 days a week, pulled all-nighter at any level of a company. Really remarkable. I mean, if you look at where the world is today, I mean, if you look at clinical trial data and execution with no delays, manufacturing and delivering, we are on track to deliver 100 million doses in Q1. 100 million doses in Q1. Even companies like J&J, which is a great company, has had delays. You have some companies that had clinical issues, clinical delays. So if you look at where the company is at now, I would argue that there's only, of all the company, 100 plus companies starting chasing the virus at the same time last year, 6 companies supported by the US government. If you look at those companies, I think there's only Pfizer and Moderna who are still, in a good place in terms of the clinical data and the manufacturing output, 15 months after the pandemic started.
Fantastic. Coming back a little bit to the COVID, how do you see the evolution with the variant? Do you believe that we will have finally one shot covering everything? How do you see the evolution of this?
So it's a good one. So let me tell you what we believe, and I want to be cautious because it's a new virus. I don't have a crystal ball, but let me tell you what we believe of the science. So we believe this virus is not going away. We believe the genie is out of the bottle, and humans are going to live with this virus forever, like we live with flu and many viruses, literally thousands and thousands of viruses during our lifetime. We believe that we're going to see many more variants. We think the variants of concern that have been identified so far, the one identified in the UK, South Africa, Brazil, and a few more like California and New York recently, we think it's just the beginning. I think there's going to be more variants. And what I worry about is variants of variants of variants, because through evolution, the virus is still evolving away from its original form to become more and more infectious. And so we think people will need to get boost, single dose boost. What we at Moderna is very committed, and we made this very public statement that we will chase whatever variant is required to chase, as long as this virus is creating problem until the virus is under full control. And this could take a couple of years. It's tough to know at this stage. What we are doing now for boosting for next fall and winter, because we think people who are getting the vaccine now should get boosted so that they can go and have a normal life next winter without a mask and having totally normal life. And so we are testing 3 boosting strategy right now in the clinic that is already in clinical study. What we're doing is we're testing people that were in study last year, try to kind of mimic through clinical study what you do if you boost somebody, 6, 9, 12 months after they got their prime series, the first 2 doses. And we're testing 3 strategy. One is the existing approved vaccine, because we believe it's going to raise all the antibodies you're making, and that will help tremendously even with variants. We're also testing a variant for the South Africa virus, which is the one that's the most away from the ancestral strain. So we basically, and that's the beauty of mRNA, we basically copied the entire genetic sequence of that virus. We dropped it into the same vaccine cassette, and within 30 days, we had made a new vaccine ready to go into clinical studies and was injected in the clinic, I think last week for the first time. And we're also testing our third strategy for boost is a 50-50 mass mix, where it's 50% of the mass of the original vaccine, 50% of the mass of a South Africa vaccine into a single dose, one shot, to see which one gives you the best outcome of neutralizing antibodies. It's nice that the only one good thing about the pandemic is now I can talk to everybody, and everybody knows about biology much more than they knew a year ago. And so the data should come very quickly. We think in April, we start doing it in March. It's 1 dose, you take the blood of people a month after, and you know where the antibodies are. So we need to figure out which one of those 3 is the best, and at what dose. We're going to test lower dose than the dose of the initial vaccine, because in vaccinology, when you boost people, you need less mass. And that's great, because if you have less mass with the same factory, you have more output. And so we're going to have much more of an opportunity to help more people in 2022 if we can go with a lower mass vaccine. And so when we have all that information in the April timeframe, we will pick 1 boost that gives us the best profile to take into a larger study. And we're talking here hundreds of people, maybe 600, 800, not 30,000 people. And we should be able a month after, so kind of a June timeframe, to get that data. So a best path timeframe is a July type of approval for a boost, which will be perfect, because you could start boosting the elderly, in August, September, before the fall really comes back to us, and so that people can have a normal fall. Countries like Switzerland have been doing really a great job ordering early the original vaccine, and again, being long-term minded, the Swiss government has already worked with us to get access to the boost, so that the citizen of Switzerland can be boosted in the fall, so that you guys can have a normal fall and go back to a normal life.
Great. Hope some journalists hear about that, because it's not always the image we have here. As you said, and let's now talk a little bit about the future, but as you said, Moderna has become a very cash-rich, or will be even more in the foreseeable future, cash-rich company. You have gained 5 to 10 years due to COVID, which is somewhere fantastic. We are unpleased to have gone through this story, but we have to find positive aspects. So where do you see the most potential for Moderna, and what will be the next drugs you are working on? What are the limits? As you said, it's almost unlimited, but where do you see the limits?
Yeah, so I think if you think about the next 5 to 10 years, which I think is a good time horizon, because 20 is a bit too far away, but next year is has a lot of variability to it, of course, is we are in an incredible place. I think we're going to build the biggest vaccine company in the world. There are more than 80 viruses that hurt humans that do not have vaccines yet. We have 8 vaccines in our pipeline today. Our team in the labs is working on many more vaccines. So you're going to see really literally an explosion of vaccine going into development, clinical studies with Moderna. We're going to do a lot of combination. Like, I want to get to the world a highly effective seasonal flu shot, because as you know, the current vaccines don't work very well, that I want to combine with COVID boost, so that in the future, and I'm talking a couple of years, not 10 years, I hope you can get an annual shot boost from Moderna in late summer, early fall, where you have a very high efficacy. I will anticipate, north of 90% efficacy for flu, and you get the COVID shots with the right variant at the time. into one single shot, and you'll be having a nice winter. So think about the opportunity of that. We could disrupt not only the entire seasonal flu marketplace, which is 4 or 5 billion annual peak sales for the industry, but you can increase that pie, because a lot of people, as you know, don't take the flu shot because like, hey, it doesn't work. But if you had a good protection against flu and COVID, and you could have a normal life, especially after this trauma that we all lived, I believe many more people will get that shot. So I think you're going to have a very big vaccine company within Moderna. And then if you look at what is in the clinic now, we have 5 drugs in oncology. We have drug in cardiology where we inject in people's heart after a heart attack, mRNA to grow new blood vessel in the heart. So if they survive a heart attack, they don't die from heart failure, which is what happens today. If you survive a heart attack, you will die from heart failure. We are starting this year to go into a clinic for rare genetic disease, for which the mRNA is a perfect technology. A kid is missing instruction for one protein, and you go with instruction for that exact protein with a message to give a kid the instruction and the protein they are missing. So the chance of that working from a biology standpoint is very, very high. We are starting to get into autoimmune disease. So if you think about this, with those already therapeutic areas in which we are, you have the 4 biggest killer of human: infectious disease, cardiology, oncology, autoimmune disease. This is 80% of the cause of death. We're not dealing with car accidents. This we cannot do with mRNA prevent car accidents yet. But so if you just look at that and the opportunity we have to help more people by just taking more drugs to go after more disease, using that technology is just mind-blowing. And we're working on the lungs, for example, that could have application, of course, in cancer, but also in respiratory disease. Instead of getting a very high dose of an antibody by going IV, like the biotech companies are doing now, which is helping a lot of people. What about getting you an antibody via a little aerosol, like a little asthma, device into your lung, right where you have a virus getting into your body? So you need much less product, which is good for the planet in terms of environment. It's good for your body because less drug is always better for your body. So there's a lot of things like this. So I think you just have different time horizon of innovation that will impact people on this call, directly, or their loved ones on different cycles. And I think the one piece that people are going to be very surprised in the next 5-10 years is I believe we can still grow 10x from where we are. If you think about it, we're going to build the biggest vaccine company in the world. The pace at which this company is going to scale is going to be very surprising. If you have a chance to do Moderna for 9 years now, and you see now what pace we have grown this company, one of the piece people don't appreciate is how scalable this company is because of the investment we made in IT. The company is fully digitalized and with systems connected, which require less employees. If you think about the level of automation we have in our factory, if you think about what we're doing in machine learning now to improve our science, improve our clinical studies, improve our manufacturing yield, soon improve our commercial team effectiveness. I think one number that somebody curious should be running, I'm sure an analyst will do it one day down the road, is look at the sales per employees of pharma. When you have 100,000 people company in those companies, look at the sales per employees in the big biotech companies like the Amgen and the Vertex. They are way higher than the pharma sales per employees. I hope somebody is going to do, because I've done the math, a sales per employee of a Moderna-like company. And you will see that it's still a step above because of the level of automation, because of how scalable this technology is, because it's a platform. And if you think about it, Yves, there's never been a platform in my industry. If you look at amazing companies like Roche and Novartis, there is no correlation in their drugs in their pipeline. Look at Novartis' 100-drug pipeline. There's not 2 drugs that have any correlation. In our pipeline, all the drugs are correlated because it's the same underlying technology. We use the same 4 chemicals, the same 4 letters to write any mRNA in all of our drugs.
What are the challenges?
Sorry?
What are the challenges, if any?
So the challenges is how do you scale successfully? I mean, if you ask me, what do I worry the most about now as a CEO? Because I always worry about stuff. That's my job. I used to worry about the science because the science was very raw. The science was very risky. Well, I don't worry about the science anymore. Not only we de-risk the science a lot, but we have an amazing team in the science, as they've shown with the outcome of their work, which is the COVID vaccine with high efficacy and how fast we're able to develop it. I used to worry about financing because we were a cash flow negative company. So while I'm going to keep a very close eye on the financial side of things, because I have to, that's my job as a CEO, I don't lose sleep, like I used to do sometime when I was worrying about the worst case scenario, what could happen. The piece I worry about is our ability to keep executing at a high level. What we did last year as a team to run that clinical study so fast without cutting any corner, without taking any delays like other companies have taken, and companies much larger than us with much more experience than us. The ability to execute in manufacturing and get that type of scale up, that's really incredible. I worry about culture dilution, in any organization, I believe a culture is a very important part of its success. I think Moderna's culture is really based on very strong collaboration because we believe a drug is a system. You need a lot of different expertise to come together as one team to make a successful use of that technology. It's engineers, biologists, chemists. Those people are very different culture. And part of the secret sauce of Moderna, I think, is to make those teams collaborate very, very well into a big leap into the science. So how do you keep that as you scale the team? How do you keep the boldness, the thinking big that the companies has had since we started? So those are the things that I'm spending a lot of time on with my head of HR, with the executive team. The good news, as you know, a lot of key players on the team are still here. And, like Stephen Hogue, who run the science. Stephen has been with us when we were a 20 people company and is really a remarkable leader. And he and I spend a lot of time with our HR team thinking about how do we keep the culture. What do we scale? What do we decide to not scale? Which is where also use of technology is really important so that we can scale the company's output with less people addition so that we can really nurture and keep the culture. So that's where I'm spending a lot of my time now is I don't worry about the science. I keep a close eye on it. Don't worry. I don't worry about financing. I need to make sure as we grow from 800 people in January of 2020 to 1,500 people now to 3,000 people in a couple of years. And as we grow from 20 drugs to 40 drugs to 60 drugs into development and many of those approved, how do we keep what has made Moderna special so Moderna stays special and keep having a very strong impact in the world?
So, and maybe to conclude, knowing all what you just said, what is your vision? What is your dream about Moderna in 2030? A very well-established company, even more than it is today. But
yeah, so I think if you take let's say a 10-15 year horizon, I think Moderna, if you take 2030 as just an easy point in time, I believe Moderna will have 5, 10, 15 products approved in that time frame. By that time frame, we'll have a pipeline of more than 100 drugs in development. That is the size of a Novartis pipeline. But the attrition rate is what is going to really shock people. If you look at traditional pharma, what does the number tell you? That 90% of the drugs leaving the lab don't make it to market. 90% fail. Well, I believe in Moderna's case, most drugs are going to be working, are going to get approved because of the platform of what we do. And because if you think about it, which is remarkable to me that so many people in the space, either in big pharma or in the financial biotech world, have not spent time really thinking about these very fundamental things, which is the protein that is coded in our molecule, that is made in your body. We do not invent. It exists in nature. If you look at the vaccine, the spike protein, we didn't invent. We literally copied and pasted the entire instruction in the virus genome of a spike protein, and we dropped it into the instruction of our messenger RNA. Let's go back to the VEGF case, the drug injected in people's heart that is in phase 2 now, which I believe is going to be working. We did not invent VEGF. VEGF is in your body and in your DNA, and it's in mine, and it's in the DNA of everybody on the planet. And it has been for literally hundreds of millions of years. And so that protein is not toxic, it's in your body. And the 4 letters we use to make the mRNA, those 4 letters exist in your body and in your cells as well. And so I think the piece that people are going to be the most shocked by is how many drugs are going to go from the labs into commercialization. And that's the piece that's going to really change the world. If you think about the P&L of a pharmaceutical company and the valuation of pharmaceutical companies, if you look at it, why are they trading so poorly versus other companies? First is the growth rate. As we all know, the sales growth rate and perpetuity of any financial analysis is really important. A tiny change in the growth rate has a massive impact on value. Well, if you look at the tech companies, people assume long-term growth rate. I don't believe people assuming Amazon in 10 years is not going to be growing. People are assuming Amazon will be growing 10 years from now. And the Amazon team is going to find ways to keep growing Amazon. Well, if you look at all the pharmaceutical models, they have zero in terminal growth rate. Why? Because people have no idea how to value it, because there is no reproducibility in pharma's pipeline and a huge amount of risk. So point number one is the sales. Second point is the return on R&D dollars. Because 90% of things fail in pharma, the return on R&D investment is awful, as has been massively documented by analysts or consultants like McKinsey, BCG, and so on. It's awful. The return on invested capital is really bad. How does that change if you go from 90% of things failing to 10 or 20% of things failing? The return on your R&D dollar is gigantic. So if you have a bigger top line number that's growing and you're playing a very big part of that into R&D, but your R&D dollar drives value because it turns into another commercial product, it has an incredible impact on your long-term growth rate. And then the last piece, as you think about the P&L of Moderna going down, is, as we've said all along, the cost of goods is going to be low because we do not use cells to make product. This is what is very expensive in biotech, is use massive plants, massive reactors. I mean, the last plant I built at Lilly was $1 billion capex for the plant. The Norwood plant, which this year is going to get 700 million doses, is a $150 million investment. To give people a lot of magnitude, 700 million doses, this is bigger than the entire seasonal flu market worldwide. Last year, the seasonal flu market worldwide was 500 million doses. So Norwood has 700 million dose output capacity for 1/10. So the cost of goods is kind of a 1/10. And if you keep going, is sales and marketing. One other thing I observed at Lilly when I was country manager of Belgium is when you sell a Me Too product, it's costing you a fortune in sales and marketing. You need a lot of sales rep. You need a big, marketing budget because you're competing with a product that's the same as yours. When you have an innovative drug, a first-in-class drug, where you have nobody and there is a clinical need, you need almost no sales and marketing because the doctors want the drug for their patients because people are sick and doctors have no solutions today. So think about CMV. It's a next big vaccine after the seasonal flu shot combined with COVID is cytomegalovirus. Most people don't know this virus. Well, it's the number one cause of birth defect in the world. Every woman before becoming pregnant should get a vaccination against CMV. And that's a 2 to 5 billion annual peak sales vaccine. Well, there's no vaccine today against CMV. So if you have a good vaccine, which I believe we're going to have a very high efficacy vaccine based on the clinical data we have seen in the phase 1 and phase 2, the OBGYN, the gynecologist, they're going to want to prescribe this product to their patient before they become pregnant so they don't have birth defect in their babies. It's a bigger problem than Down syndrome. Everybody worries about Down syndrome during pregnancy, but very few people worry about CMV because they don't know about CMV. But as you start having a product, this is going to change drastically. So the sales and marketing intensity of launching CMV is going to be way cheaper than launching a Me Too drug. And so if you think about Moderna's P&L versus a big pharma, we're going to have growth in perpetuity into financial models, much higher return on capital of R&D investment, lower cost of goods, and lower sales and marketing. So I think it's going to give us the ability to generate a lot of cash that we can plug back into the pipeline and into the platform because it's a platform. So I want to create a massive snowball effect. So the more we grow, the more cash we have, the more we invest, the more we go, and we just keep on repeating because we have a platform.
What should be the valuation of Moderna in 10 years?
Yeah, you are the financial guy, but I really believe that Moderna, as I say, could be the most valuable life science company in the world. Because again, all the existing companies, if you look at them, I mean, I think the biggest company is J&J, where I think 400 billion market cap, because you cannot predict what J&J will be 10 years from now. And actually, J&J is the most predictable because it has a consumer business, it has, medical equipment business, but its pharma business is totally unpredictable. And you see it with patent cliff of big companies. I mean, Merck right now, I mean, MSD, the US Merck, in 2028, Keytruda is going to go off patent. By then, it's going to be 35% of Merck's sales. And if you look at Merck's pipeline, it's in every analyst report. They have no way to replenish that sales. And that's the problem that pharma has. They have a model that is unpredictable. The beauty of a company like Moderna with mRNA is we have a platform and our molecule is an information molecule. And we can do so many things that you cannot do with small molecule, which is the traditional way pharma has on product, or large molecule protein recombinant. And so we're going to have products for many, many decades to come.
Stéphane, thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Congratulations for everything which has been done. It's always fascinating to talk with you. I look forward to see you again and maybe do this exercise in a few years and see what the evolution has been. So thank you and have a good day.
Well, Yves, thank you so much for everything. And have a great day. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.